Volunteering and giving to charity. Should you do it? And if you do, should you keep it quiet? After cutting my hair, and if you're on the video, you'll definitely see what I mean, we did this to raise funds for Variety, the children's charity. Many people, including me, had looked up about donating hair and realized that, I need to donate quite a lot, 35.5 centimeters, 14 inches to be exact. And for many of us, that's just too much. We don't actually have enough. And so we kind of go, oh, that's it then, we can't do it. Or maybe your hair's dyed, or maybe there's a bit of grey in it. And you think, oh, I can't give it to Variety. But there are other options. And the great thing is, if you make people aware of the other options, then you might find that they actually do it. So I think by communicating this, it helps to make people aware of something they might not have known about, and it also makes people think. Today on the podcast, I'm going to go into this in a bit more detail. Welcome to the FAQ Business Podcast for business owners, covering 4 pillars: actionable education, inspiring leaders, businesses like you, and thought leadership, where we challenge your thinking. Hosted by myself, Jane Tweedy, I'm founder and lead trainer of FAQ Business Training, where we want to avoid you getting ripped off or ripping yourself off. We'll feature an amazing diversity of guests with lots to educate and inspire you. Let's jump into today's episode of the FAQ Business Podcast. Hi there, I'm Jane Tweedy. I am the founder of FAQ Business Training and the host of FAQ Business Podcast. Here I am today again. Oh my gosh. Seriously, where has this year gone? It has been cray-cray. But anyway, we will get back to normal programming fairly soon. However, something I've just done and something I wanted to talk about for a while is about volunteering. Today, I just want to talk about what volunteering does for both parties, and also importantly, whether or not you should be disclosing it, because there's a lot of debate around that, about are you just doing it to get notoriety kind of thing, or are you doing it for some other purpose? Let's talk first about what volunteering can do for the organization and for you. So volunteering can help fill in needs gaps with organizations that couldn't otherwise afford to keep going. And it really does allow their money to be spent in other more critical areas. It can help them bring in specialist expertise, and it may be necessary legally. This is because some structures do require members and other people to be involved, which means that they're unlikely to be getting paid. What about for you? What's in it for you? The WIFM, or what's in it for me? You can use it to build your own skills. So it could be work or skills experience. Maybe you want a transition job, and maybe you want to try something out. It can be an opportunity to do that. Some people do it purely for the social aspect, to get out and about. Some definitely do it more for the straight giving back and the vibes that it gives you. And also, particularly after natural disasters, we do see a lot of community spirit and camaraderie come out. And people just really pitch in and get together and get things done. And unfortunately for some of the people in New South Wales that have just encountered their 3rd flood in 6 weeks, that is exactly what they're doing. I saw a thing on the news and a guy had a tinny, a little motorized boat, and he was taking that around places and carting people around and things. And, you know, that sort of skill becomes useful, and that sort of vehicle becomes useful when your roads are now rivers. To some extent, today's podcast connects with the recent podcast I did on whether exposure pays the bills. It may pay in this case, though, more of a social or community spirit type card as well. But do remember that time taken volunteering does take up time that you could be spending doing something else. And again, like anything else, we've just got to weigh things up. In fact, somebody might have been a little bit horrified when they found out I was doing max potential again. But calm down a little when you realize that, oh, okay, you don't have to physically go there this time. You only have to go to 4 events. The rest of them are all online. And honestly, I couldn't have signed up if it was in person. The extra commitment of travel, which would have been 3-hour round trip for like another dozen or so connections, just wasn't going to work. So we've got to look at things and weigh things up for ourselves. So volunteering is one aspect. On the other side, we have just straight giving to charity. There's a lot of reasons why we give funds to charity, and that can be a good thing, right? If you can't do anything or offering anything time-wise or skill-wise, then giving money can be a really good option. And obviously there's plenty of things that money needs to buy. So giving money is a great way to also help. Should you tell people that you are donating money to a charity or that you are doing something to help out, you're volunteering? There's a lot of debate around this, and I'm just going to bring in some examples from the bushfire period back in 2020, because there was a lot of people copping a lot of flack in Australia about this particular thing. You might be familiar, if you're from Australia, about the Celeste Barber Fund appeal. She initially was only going for a very small, modest amount, $150,000 or something, whatever it was. It was quite a small amount. But it went viral and it went off, and her particular fundraising ended up raising over $50 million. Unfortunately, we later found out that there were some issues with the funds were being delivered and how they could be delivered, and that came in part due to misunderstandings about organizations' requirements. And unfortunately, when you're dealing with organizations that have some connection to government and things, there can be very strict rules on what they can and can't do, and whether they're stupid or not, unfortunately, you have to abide by them. So as one thing, there was that issue going on. But what was going on in the small business space is there were a lot of people that think, oh, I can use this to give funds to the bushfire victims. But there were also a lot of people that were using it to get personal gain. There were people doing things like, I'm going to give 10% of my profits to the bushfire charities. Sounds okay, right? But the thing is, they're not disclosing is what actually is their profit level, if any. Because if they're not actually making any profit, all they're doing is increasing their sales, and they are effectively giving nothing to charity. Other people were being much more upfront and honest about it, and they were saying, right, for everything we sell, we will give $1 to charity. So that way there's no miscommunication, there's no issues. You literally just go, okay, you've bought an item, $1 goes to that charity. Much better way of doing it than things like a percentage of profits, when that can be a bit misleading. Another one that I saw that really got vilified was for personal gain type reasons, was that she was manipulating the algorithms effectively in social media. And so she said that she would donate $1 to the bushfire appeal for every like that she got. Of course, that's encouraging people to go like her business, share her business, get more likes and things, which of course then, if she has a social media strategy attached to that, could have been done for reasons that were more for personal advantage than they were to genuinely raise funds for charity. You've got to look at the situation. This particular person, though, had manipulated things a lot in the past, so it was more an example potentially of their character from the past shining through, and therefore people not necessarily looking at them as being a genuine and honest type business. So some of the other reasons of not communicating whether you are donating something or not is not just because it brings into question whether you're doing it for personal gain, but also it is that kind of thing, well, you know, are you just doing this to get a pat on the back and make yourself feel good, and you need that validation from others? Because that can be seen as a bit of a rescuer type drama triangle. So it's actually connected with people that are potentially victims. So it's actually can be a bit of an issue, and it's something to be wary of. So if you do something genuinely just to help somebody, and genuinely that's all you do it for, awesome. But if you actually do something and then you get upset that the person hasn't said thank you, that can mean that you're caught up in a bit of this drama triangle. Just got to be a little bit mindful of that. Whether or not to share or not becomes kind of difficult, because again, you get trolls on social media that go, oi, all you're doing this for is just to get attention, rah, 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 all right? And the thing is, ignore the trolls. Don't worry about them so much. But here's an example of a time when something went brilliantly by communicating it. And that was a post that was initially shared by the Digital Picnic. The Digital Picnic is run by a lovely lady by the name of Cherie Clonan. Now, she talks about a number of pillars of content that are not related at all to digital marketing, and they're very much related to being a good human and doing good in the world and that type of thing. One thing though is that Cherie's background, she was a victim of a domestic violence household, and therefore she moved around foster homes and things like that. So she'd had a pretty rough upbringing herself. When she got to the point where she's running a multi-million-dollar business, she's sort of, okay, how can I give back? How can my business give back? And one of the things she did was to invest $21,000, very specific, but that was the amount to cover the rent for an apartment. And that apartment was to house domestic violence victims that were coming out of a bad relationship and needed somewhere to hide, effectively. So it was meant to be as a place that could churn over. But she had situations like one recently where the person that went into the apartment, was a person that then went and did study and things. And so in that case, they actually decided to keep the person in the place for an extended period of time. So great, you're really touching the life of one person, but it's only one person. Now, the thing was, initially, Cherie didn't let people know about this apartment. In fact, I think it was for a full year or something before she even told anyone about it. It was called her secret apartment. However, what she did was when she put this post up, it went onto 4 different platforms that she's on, and it had millions of views. The great thing about a post going viral and getting millions of views is that there's going to be some people in there that it really connects with and it really touches, but also combined with people that can actually make a difference. And this is exactly what happened. Some businesses that were following her, or people in businesses that were following her, she ended up with 3, at least, multi-billion-dollar global companies seeing her posts, loving what she was doing and going, oh my gosh, if she can do that, why aren't we doing that? And so those companies reached out and partnered with the same organization that she'd arranged her apartment with, and they provided 91 additional apartments. 91 apartments, all because Cherie put up this post and she made the situation aware. We now knew that this was an option, that you could pay for an apartment and have people looked after for a period of time and feel safe. So that was something that was hugely beneficial, that she happened to tell that story. Because she told it, these people saw it, and then they went and did it on a much bigger scale. So her little one apartment became 92 apartments. That is so many more people that she can help. But it also means she could keep her apartment for a single person and really, really deeply helping them, rather than superficially helping a lot of people. So that was a really good one. So that is an example of where, yeah, shutting up doesn't actually help. It really does help to get the message out. And even with the hair chop one, as I said earlier, by me telling people about the fact that, hey, yeah, it's awesome to give your hair a variety because it is for children. And, you know, there might be children suffering from leukemia or some other condition where they have lost their hair. And what that means, though, is they get a wig that is actually proper human hair, but it's also a wig that's long enough for them to actually style it. They can still have ponytails and they can do plaits and things. Whereas if the hair is short, like mine now is post my chop, there is not a huge amount of styling that can be done with it. So this was fantastic to make people aware that, hey, although that's the holy grail, there is a couple of other options. So in Australia, we have sustainable salons, and they do dyed hair and hair that's as short as 20 centimeters, which is a lot different from varieties. So their rules are a lot less strict than varieties rules are, which are very, very strict. And then you've got another charity that does hats or beanies and things with some hair below them. So it makes it look like you've got hair sticking out. And obviously that can be much shorter again. So there are options. And by me telling people about this, then I think most people know about variety and what they do and the great stuff they do, but they don't necessarily know about the other options for people that want to donate their hair. Now, just to give you a little backstory though, where did my volunteering journey start? And I'm very much a person that prefers to give a hand up rather than a hand out. And I think that kind of goes with why I tend to more volunteer than give money to charity. So volunteering in charities I'm currently working with. So obviously I do one-off things like the hair chop. I've been contacted on LinkedIn to speak at an event with new business owners from a very disadvantaged space. And I'm more than happy to do that sort of thing. As I talked about in the exposure podcast that I did, I'm more than happy to do stuff like that. If it's something that I feel really gives something, and particularly where I can do it remotely, it really makes it quite manageable. If you have to travel to something, it can be a little bit more tricky because obviously there's physical costs outlay, but more importantly, it's just time. And time is something that is very poor in my world at the moment. But also regular things I'm doing at the moment. I am on the board of the Hawkesbury Financial Services Limited, and I am what's called a volunteer community bank director. So we partner with or JV with Bendigo. So Bendigo Adelaide Bank, and we together therefore run the Bendigo community banks of North Richmond and districts and Richmond. So we run those two branches in the Hawkesbury. And the great thing about that is that we have given millions back to the community, millions of dollars worth of grants to things like schools, to sports teams, to potentially domestic violence type situations. So all of those type of things, anything that is a grant related activity from a not-for-profit type space, we can certainly help out or at least consider that. It really also provides an extra benefit for me. It helps me to keep connected to the banking space, something that I have been involved in for nearly 20 years before I left to go into the small business space. And it also lets me utilize my strategies type skills because we have sort of biannual strategy meetings. Was it semi-annual strategy meetings? You know what I mean? Twice a year. And I recognize that I'm not giving enough to this particular organization. However, I can certainly rectify that in the future. So I want to spend a lot more time in the marketing side of things because there is opportunities in that space. I'm also currently back for a 5th round after about a 3-year hiatus from the Max Potential Community Coaching Program. Unfortunately, the local program isn't funded anymore in Penrith, which is a real pity, which means that I have to travel elsewhere to go do it. So I'm currently part of the Cumberland program, which is fine. But as I mentioned earlier, I wouldn't do it if I had to go every single meeting, every single connection session, whatever, if I had to go in person, because it's an extra hour and a half, 2 hours. No, more than that. Yeah, good 2 hours round trip in addition to the time at the session. So it's just too much for me. I just don't have the capacity in my calendar to fit that few extra hours, potentially twice a week. It's just too much. I can't do it. So I was really grateful when I saw that it was online, and therefore that only 4 of the sessions need to be in person and the rest of them can be online. That made a huge difference to me. The Max Potential Community Coaching certainly gives me as much as I give to it. So I work with a year 11 student and I really help them to work on their personal leadership skills. And it's really rewarding, and I've done it, as I said, 4 times before. And it's amazing when you see the results that you get with the young adults that you work with. It's fantastic. And if we can get these people at that ripe age set up for skills that are going to carry them forward for life, it is awesome. And I love it. And I love seeing the results for it. Genuinely love it. It's amazing. On the flip side though, there's also a lot of benefit for me. For a start, it can be training hours towards my ICF accreditation renewal, my International Coaching Federation, professional certified coach status. So things like that can be, useful to me from that perspective. It reminds me of certain things. It teaches me potentially other ways of doing different coaching techniques. So that can be really useful. And I also get a coach throughout that as well. So, that's another benefit of it. So there is definitely benefits to me. And also you're working on your own personal leadership as well at the same time. And that's the thing with anything we do, right? There's always that kind of something mirrored back to you. Someone recently surprised me. They have been a person that has been quite anti helping people that are strangers, in part due to issues that they'd had many years ago where they had been giving out hampers to people, and some people were really taking advantage of it and taking the mickey with it, and that really annoyed him, and he just didn't want to proceed with that anymore. But recently he did something that made me really proud and really happy, and he gives blood. And giving blood, you can only give blood every 3 months or so or whatever. It's quite a big gap between appointments. However, if you give plasma, you can go much, much more regularly. And that is awesome, because it was ironic that he did that when, literally just before, one of my connections has had a bad hangover, if you like, from COVID. So she has a primary immunodeficiency disorder, which is actually Primary Immunodeficiency Month this month in Australia. And what that means is that she has not recovered from COVID yet. She's still in hospital. She's been in hospital for 7 weeks. My gosh, the poor thing. And she's back on oxygen again. She was only off oxygen for a short amount of time when she was resting. But as soon as she stands up, her oxygen levels just drop. But now even in bed, she's back on oxygen. It's just so sad. But people like her, they just don't need, a single one-off, you've had an accident and you need some blood. This is blood all the time, or blood products all the time. So she needs a lot of that type of stuff. So she was really happy when she found out that another person was joining that queue. And not only that, but he'd got other people from his work to do it as well, and formed a work group doing it, which is really awesome. And I did, of course, wonder, had my attitude rubbed off a little bit on him, because it was a bit of a change in attitude. But, it might have just been timing, and he might have just decided that that was a good thing to do. I don't know. But volunteering for me is always going to be something that I do. I started when I was 6 years old. And when I started, I was collecting money for a charity. My next door neighbour was heavily involved in, back then it was called the Intellectually Handicapped Children. They don't tend to use those type of words anymore. Handicap's not seen as a good term. But yeah, he was heavily involved in that program. And so I would literally go and collect money with him and stuff when he was doing door-to-door door knocking back in those days. So, I started young in volunteering, and I got very used to doing it. I was a brownie and a Girl Guide, and as part of that, we would do a lot of volunteer type work. We went into old people's homes and kept the old people company and, things like that. So I've been involved in that throughout. I have done things like at AXA. AXA had a thing called Hearts in Action, and you could be involved in that one. And we would do things like collect money on the streets and things for charities. We did, a beach cleanup day. So I did that. Moved to Australia. JP Morgan had a volunteer program as well. JP Morgan, I went into Granville, and we really went and cleaned up a school. That was very funny, because there was part of the job was painting, part of it was cleaning up, part of it was gardening. And I ended up in the gardening crew purely because most of the people had no idea how to garden. They lived in apartments and things, and they actually didn't know how to garden, which I found quite amusing. given that I was from New Zealand and, I had grandparents and that loved gardening. So it was definitely not going to be something that I didn't know how to do. So that was quite fascinating. And then I went to NAB, and NAB had a couple of days a year that you could use for charity type events or volunteering. So that was pretty cool. So I took advantage of that as well. And they also had some organized things. So for instance, we went to Middlehead, and we went and basically were digging up these corn things out of the ground, these weeds. And it was just, that particular one I found a bit frustrating. It was good to get some education, but honestly, we really didn't do a lot. You didn't feel like you walk away from the day and go, I achieved a lot today. I've also done things like cooking Christmas dinners for missions and things. So all sorts of stuff over the years. So many different ways to give back. I was a volunteer in an incorporated association. I was the treasurer of the photo club. I've done so many things over the years, and it will always be part of me. It is just who I am. It's something that I do. It's ingrained in me. So I just want to leave you with this. Whether or not you tell anyone about it, is volunteering something that you're going to do and you are going to have in your life. Thank you for listening in today. My name is Jane Tweedy, and I'm the host of the FAQ Business Podcast. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the FAQ Business Podcast, available on all good podcast services. You can subscribe today via faqbusinesspodcast.com.au or directly on Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, or Spotify. Subscribe, follow, share, and where able, review our podcast, or leave us a comment on either YouTube or our blog page. Thanks for helping us to help you, the small to medium businesses who are growing and want to make a difference. Look forward to connecting with you again on the next episode of the FAQ Business Podcast.